today's sessions, they are all on YouTube except for the first session. And so whatever gets said in this larger circle is a part of the recording if the microphone picks it up. But whatever you share at your tables is not recorded. The recording is paused, so feel free to share, in the way that you want to with that in mind today. So along the way, there was the village in Villafranca del Bierzo, where I met up with my friend Leslie to complete the end part of El Camino de Santiago. And this is looking back on the village from the Franciscan monastery. Now, Franciscan means the order that was founded by St. Francis of Assisi. And this is a very old monastery that was built during St. Francis's lifetime. Apparently, he asked Doña Urraca to fund and support the building of this monastery. I had talked about her before. She's part of that very colorful royal family in Spain. And according to the story, if you want to see a sort of a real life Game of Thrones, on Prime, there's something called El Cid, ELCID, that tells the story of her family. And she was involved in the death of several family members. I won't spoil alert if you do want to tell, but it's interesting. Sometimes those who cause the greatest damage then turn to God. And she did things like try to track down, remember in the city of Leon, what some claim is the Holy Grail, or the chalice that Jesus used, that she found from an Egyptian merchant. And then when St. Francis approached her, she wholeheartedly supported his request to build a monastery. So we might think of all of us as repentant sinners, and sometimes those most deeply aware of grievous sins sometimes turn to those kinds of actions. So we're walking then a mountainous, hilly way. I took that photo from our pathway that day. That was a long day. Then we had a shorter day entering the region of Galicia. This is the final westernmost region of Spain. Remember how I was talking before about the unrelenting heat waves, walking through days in the mid-90s. In Galicia, it was cold and rainy every day.
I noticed the green.
Yeah. People say, oh, it looks like Ireland, and it has a very strong Celtic influence, along the northern Spanish coast. There are bagpipes around, there are, the weather is completely different. So that's why we pack all the layers and carry them and go. But this statue of the woman is right before entering a village of O Cebreiro, which sounds both Irish and Spanish, doesn't it? And it feels that way too. Very windy also as we're going in. And this is the oldest church along the way. It was built in the 9th century, so it's the oldest one that's been in continuous use. And in terms of spiritual feeling, I wasn't alone in feeling like this is sort of a spiritual heartbeat of the whole Camino. There is this, part of it is the beauty of the surroundings, and it's a village that is really just dedicated to the pilgrims who come at this point in time. But it's ancient, and there's an awareness of the people who've been walking for well over 1,000 years walking this same pilgrimage before us, including St. Francis himself. This church was already more than 300 years old when he made his pilgrimage and stopped at this church. So there's these are some images from the inside of the church. Near the entrance is the old baptistry in the center of the font, the baptismal font. And as I said, most villages or churches have a pilgrim's mass of some kind available in the evening. And this was a very special one. They had it set up, and the mass itself was just beautiful, and it was the most international. They, at the beginning of service, invited speakers of different languages to read scripture text, and we heard more than 10 different languages reading the text in that church. And I was honored and asked to read the English text from 1 John that states that God is love, and those who love abide in God, and God abides in them, just like we sang this morning. And when we entered, you see those people had set up these votive candles to light. And one of the things I was realizing at this point, having walked a long ways already, one of my personal lessons is that I need help, that I need a lot of help. And sometimes I need to ask for help. So it was just an awareness of how much I need help. And before service, I told my friend Leslie, I'm going to go, we have some time before service, I'm going to go light a candle for all our kids, meaning hers and mine, and the in-laws and everyone. And I could not get that candle lit. I tried, it went out. I tried again, it went out. And finally 2 other pilgrims, came over and helped me. And I was just like, I was laughing out loud, like, okay, I get it. I get this lesson. I think I'm getting it. I need help. I need a lot of help. Sometimes even these simple things. Anita needs help. Okay. That might not be one of your life lessons. Or spiritual, it was a spiritual lesson for me also, how much I need help and will throughout my life. I need the help of others and of God. So I invite you with your companions around the table, because I got to share this story with companions along the way also, of learning something about yourself through experience with yourself, your environment, and others. What is something that you came to learn about yourself? Maybe through a one-time experience. In my case, it was through thing after thing after thing, and finally in this church was like, okay, may I never forget. So think about a time you learned something about yourself, maybe that has some. Everything we learn about ourselves, I think, has a spiritual connection and connotation, and relates to our life with God. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes to talk with each other around your tables, those who wish to share a story at a time that you've learned something about yourself. So this is a picture of or set of pictures of the village of O Sobrero at the edge of Galicia. This is one of their traditional soups called caldo gallego. It's beautiful soup with parsnips and potatoes and beans and collard greens or another green and leeks.
What is the building on the right?
We don't know. because it was unique. There are other, traditional buildings of a certain style. But this one was very old, and we walked around it, tried to look for a sign, couldn't find anyone who sort of knew, other than it was an old building that got preserved.
Now, did they let cars go down through that street, or should I walk through?
It's just walking. The cars come up the mountain to by where that statue of the woman was, but then through the village itself. It's just.
Should we go down that road?
Yeah, no. I mean, well, maybe there might have been trucks that were servicing the hostels and the residences and little shop and restaurants, but very limited basis. Yeah. So Galicia has the biggest cows you've ever seen, who are very happy. All along the way, you follow the yellow arrows that are called waymarks. This kind of waymark on a tree was sort of unusual. Usually it's more like on the ground, but that sort of, the intent is to keep you on the way and keep from getting lost. I still, as you know, got lost a few times. And then they had these slugs that reminded me of home, except they're black in Galicia. It's a slug, yeah. Like a banana slug, only it's a black slug. Beautiful countryside all along the way. It is, some of these pictures were when the clouds finally parted, and I could take prettier pictures, but this statue of the pilgrim sort of gives you an idea of how you're walking most of the way, and because there is driving rain and wind through a lot of it. But absolutely beautiful. The one to the right was just taken after an evening mass, people leaving the church. It was nice to be able to, end the day with a little rest in the afternoon, go to mass, and then go to dinner. It's a lovely rhythm. We had sights. This is an 800-year-old chestnut tree that was sort of famous, so we hugged the tree. These were three women who became friends along the way, named Ruth, Melinda, and Gretchen. Ruth and Gretchen are married, and Melinda's a friend they made first week of El Camino, and they just sort of stuck together. Melinda is a scholar on Spain, and so she has actually studied and taught about El Camino de Santiago, but this was her first time to be able to walk the entire way because of kids at home and family responsibilities and so on. So we learned a lot from them and just had a really good time. There was a heavy downpour scheduled the next day, and I wanted to make it to the city of Sarria, and looked at the forecast and said, the heaviest rain is going to be in the afternoon. So we decided to make an earlier start that day. There was no place for breakfast where we were staying, so we just got on the trail. And usually, every 3 to 5 miles, there's going to be a little village that has some little place you can get coffee and a bun or a piece of fruit or something, and there wasn't. And I was getting hangry, and it was rough. And then I came across this, we saw this sign called Montan, and it came at just the right time. It was quite a surprise. It was an open door of this building, and there was fruit laid out, and some bread and butter, and this is a little video of it. And it was designed as just this rest, refreshment place for pilgrims. And if I show that again, the man in the red is named Simon. And I was so grateful to get a little food. I said to my friend Leslie, I could really use a coffee. And he walked up and he said, how would you like your coffee? And I said, really? Like anything? I said, I love a cappuccino. He said, okay. And asked Leslie and then asked another couple people. And, 15 minutes later came out with a tray of these beautiful coffees. And he's someone who originally from Australia but speaks many different European languages, walked El Camino. He's a spiritual person who meditates daily, and he felt called to support pilgrims along the way. And so he just bought this, kind of abandoned property. There are a lot of abandoned properties for sale in some of these villages. And, he was smart enough to know this was sort of a food desert along the way, and how extraordinarily grateful people would be to have a place to rest. He has sort of a compost toilet in the back that, with special instructions how to use that. And, places for art. He has a little place, you might have seen the sign, with people who want to do yoga, have a mat they can use. It's just, anyway, it was one more example of how El Camino changed someone's life in a way that he wanted to give back and make his life about the spiritual journey of others.
Did he take donations?
Yeah,
He did.
yeah, he did take donations, but it was
Yeah.
very low key. A lot of these places have a little, bowl for donations to offset the cost, and we're very happy to provide that. It's such a gift to receive that, and was a surprise, as I said. Who does that? Who would? I didn't even know to look for that. I was just feeling like this is going to be a hard day. So, let's see. Oh, I need to go back here. So then more pretty sights on the way to the city of Sarria. Now, for people who walk a shorter distance of El Camino de Santiago, who want to do it sort of officially, we'll talk about that in a future session. The minimum distance is 100 kilometers. And so Sarria is the starting place for some of those people if they want to start there and walk to Santiago. So it is that last leg, and there's a lot of people who are coming in on buses or trains to Sarria to start.
Is this where did Diana start?
That's where she started. Diana Gill started in Sarria with a couple of her friends. And so another surprise, when we got to Sarria, and we're walking around the streets, we saw these huge projects starting. And at first just looked at them, but then we started asking the people, hey, what are you doing? And it was for the festival of Corpus Christi, which, for those of you who might have been raised Catholic, are you familiar with that? Do you know what it means? It means the body of Christ. So June 25th is a festival that's observed in the Catholic Church, not so much in our Lutheran Church, called Corpus Christi, the body of Christ, but which, of course, is a joyful thing, right? So it turns out this family, like extended family and their friends, a few years ago decided to make the streets of Sarnia glorious for Corpus Christi. And so they put down these plastic mats, draw designs, and then they have all kinds of colored materials that are, some are sand, some are little pebbles or rocks, some are leaves, all kinds of different materials. And so we said, could we help? And so we did. And there were kids who got involved in helping, and we spent about an hour and a half, just trying to be a part of this thing that was happening, and chatting with the locals as we could along the way. And
So they do this every year and then they pick them up and
yeah.
throw them out?
Yeah, and rainy weather, right, in Galicia. So you see these bright colors, and it was really beautiful, but it did rain that night. And so, the same colors, some of the reds got bleached right out on this one in the middle. But they're doing it all through the streets. It was just so beautiful. This was all walking around the next day or that evening as they're doing it. As we were doing it, because we got to participate. So, we talked about this, we have talked about this here in recent years and come up with a few ideas, but I hope as a faith community we can keep doing it. So, was it a year or two ago on Pentecost during COVID, we decided to invite people to go fly kites down at the park with us. And we gave out, what did we give out? I don't remember, Rolf would remember. We gave out, invitations to worship, and also just, something about Pentecost and some kind of Pentecost gift that was left out there, and an invitation to celebrate.
We gave out seeds on Easter
We've given out seeds.
down at Harvey.
Oh, that's what it was. We gave out flower seeds. That's what I'm thinking of.
The little
That's what I'm thinking of. We decided to do that because of wires, and the kite flying thing didn't quite work out. But we're continuing to try to figure out, so many of our neighbors don't even really understand what faith is about. How can we be more creative and just sharing the joy of it?
At the Taste of Morgan Hill, we gave out flyers for the community tables.
Right. We have shown up at the Taste of Morgan Hill. We could talk about that again.
Yeah, several different times.
Gary and Diane would remember when we used to have a float in the Morgan Hill Parade.
Right.
We had a truck. Asco.
Yeah.
An Asco truck.
We aren't advertising like Easter. I couldn't find that in the newspaper. So I mean, a lot of people do it digitally now, so if you're in that.
Yeah, it's always a decision to make on our advertising budget, whether we spring for the newspaper ads or not. Those are calls that our church council leaders make each year. How best to spend our advertising dollars. And those are good ideas in terms of letting the community know who we are. But is there a way? Are there other creative ways we can sort of, on holy days of celebration the night before?
Remember the year we had an art festival?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't necessarily advertised to the community, but it was
You commented about cost of advertising. I believe advertising in the Gilroy Life, and I think the Morgan Hill Life is the same paper, is free.
It's not.
It's
Well, the advertising, but you could put it if you're gonna have a one-day thing, you can
Yeah, that's not free, but, yeah.
For the one day,
We have put notices in there. Yeah.
Okay, well,
not that, it's not that.
yeah, well, the notices are, I know the Parkinson's meeting group puts in that it doesn't cost anything.
Well, anyway, let's, you know, maybe those images of Corpus Christi will spark your imagination to think and pray together about how to open up the joy in our own community. We'll one day get our frontage back. We'll,
And a sign.
and a sign. But, you know, maybe it's a little parade, or maybe it's I don't know what it is.
Well, it seems like it's two-pronged. One is, what are we going to celebrate and how? And then the other is, how do we invite the community?
Yeah, I think especially if we have special music for one of the church festivals, we could maybe make more of it somehow I know we do already let the
So-
community know.
Yeah, I'm
But that's one of the best gifts of this congregation.
absolutely, and I'm 100%, as the sermon was, for inviting people in.
Yeah.
What was striking to me about this was, it was going out with the message. It wasn't, you know, it wasn't a come into church, it was a look out on the streets.
Yeah.
We are celebrating Corpus Christi. So both are important, I think, yeah. Did you have
We could offer
No, you were
music
just stretching.
elsewhere. Just stretching.
All right.
Hot air balloons, so that they could see us from a distance.
So, again, rugged landscape, going to the next city called Puerto Marin, and we crossed this high bridge into the city. Now, walked into the city, and
Is that a walking bridge?
it is a walking and a driving bridge, both. And this had been a 14-mile day, so you get there and you see the stairs that you have to at the end of 14 miles. So, but this group who was resting on the stairs, every time someone got to the top, they applauded. So that helped give a little encouragement. Now, this was interesting because during Franco's years of rule in Spain, the old city of Puerto Marin was actually flooded because of the dam that was built, entirely flooded. And it included a 12th century church. And so before that flood took place with the building of the dam, they moved the church stone by stone to this new location that the city was going to be. And anyway, that was sort of an interesting thing to come across. We looked for an evening mass that evening, and we couldn't find one, but there was this youth group who'd been walking along El Camino, Catholic youth group, and we saw that they were going in this big church for mass, and so we just went in the side door and joined in. And it was lovely mass because, as you see, most of the youth were all sitting on the chancel, and then just a few of the sponsors and additional youth were sitting in the front pews. And then went to dinner, and who should I run across? But our lovely Diana Gill, who I didn't think we were I thought we were going to be missing each other by a day or two, but it turns out there we were in the same city at the same time, in Spain. And outside the Italian restaurant, we decided to change it up from Spanish food. And you can see by the way we're dressed, it's chilly here, even though it's June, and we'd just been sweltering a week or two before. So throughout Galicia, there were these things called horreos, Horreo, that is an ancient way of storing grain, and so they've left a lot of them up.
I wonder if that's your friend.